So, Joel, let's talk about context matters.
Because it does.
Because it does, and we have seen a pattern. We have seen people who are trying to do the inner work, who are using the Enneagram to try and grow in self and social awareness. All really good things. And yet there are contexts in which there's roadblocks, it's impossible, can't get through, it's not working. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, first thing that comes to mind for me is, and of course it would because of the nature of the work we do, it's relationships. Like I'm thinking of clients in the last couple of weeks that I've interacted with and thinking about, because I've been thinking about context matters, that's been on my mind as I'm listening to them talk. And there are situations where they will try to start to do some inner work, but then they get derailed. And there are a lot of derailers along the way to our journey. And context plays a role in that, a significant piece of it. So if I think about one of my clients, it's definitely the immediate context. Like their relationships are so difficult and so toxic that I think until they emerge out of that and get out of that, get unstuck from that, that there's not going to really be much you can do in terms of more of the inner work. And here's the reason why, to my mind. Context affects our sense of safety, our sense of well-being, and our brains are hardwired for that, for safety, for well-being, for protection of the self. And if your context is threatening to you, your brain will not allow you to go into more self-reflective unless you can exit that, which they do in coaching. They exit that world for a moment and come into a different context. And I think that that's fascinating if we think about even the contexts that we inhabit. They're not one. We have many different contexts that we inhabit, which also pull out different parts of who we are. And so in a relationship where, I'm conversing with a client, we're in this Zoom room together. It is as if we've entered into a neutral space, something that does not have their current world at play, which is helpful because then they can exit that, we can talk, we can reimagine, and then we can go back in. But if you're coming back in, and every time you go back in, your context hasn't changed, how sustainable is that? So I think context, and at least one of the big pieces that I've run into, and I think there's probably 4 or 5 big pieces to context, one of them being relationships, which I just mentioned. So I think that that's something to consider when you're thinking about why you're having such a difficult time, growing. Think about who's surrounding you. Think about what that has done to you and perhaps what could change if you could reimagine that.
Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit of what we mean when we say context. So there's different realms in which your context, we're referring to what that means. So there could be the location that you're in. What is happening directly around you? Are you living somewhere that's extremely noisy? Are you living somewhere where it's very quiet and you can sleep well at night? The context of your location, the kind of work that you do, like the context of the work that you do. Is it work that is life-giving to you? Is it really draining? And if it's draining, do you actually have recovery and rest in there? Is it Greg McCowan who says don't do more in a day than you can recover from in a night? Right. Yeah. So is the day draining you? There's a spiritual context, right, that you might be in that could be energizing or it could be draining you. There is relational context that you're in. Certain kinds of relationships. There's been a couple of things lately that I've had to deal with within my relational network that I know if I have that interaction, that work on that thing, I will be exhausted afterwards. It will take something out of me. So I'm probably not at my best to do some good, inner work or try and move forward in my life in that context. So there's certain things that can happen there. There is a financial situation where if people are struggling financially, it is really hard to deal with some of that inner world stuff, which is why we're going to do a whole series with Sean on finances and because that does provide so much of a context of freedom to free a lot of the other areas sometimes. So there's a lot of different kind of contexts. There's the emotional one, the relational one, the intellectual one. Are you in a situation where you have to believe certain things?
Yeah.
There is all of these the setting that you're in, because I can't tell you how many times like a couple has come to us for coaching and they're trying to figure out how to relate better, but they both have full-time jobs and hobbies that help them individually recover. They have small kids in the home. And so most of their lives go to logistics. And then they come and they want to improve their relationship. But the first thing I have to do is like normalize, like you are in a hard situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you had a sick kid. Neither of one of you got that much sleep. You both had to get up and go to your very taxing jobs the next day. You came home and the house was a wreck and you tried to make dinner and then tried to get the kids to bed. And then all you could do is collapse on the couch and watch a movie. And then an issue came up and you wondered why you didn't have the fuel to kind of be able to handle it. Well, normalize. That's a really hard situation to be in.
Yeah.
The context is difficult. And sometimes the context is preventative from being able to have some of the space that creates the awareness to do the inner work. Because we talk about like so much of doing this inner work and going from being reactive to intentionally responsive, responding with intention. And we quote Viktor Frankl when he says that between stimulus and response, there needs to be a pause. And in that pause is the freedom to choose. But when you are in a swirl of life that doesn't feel like there is a pause, it doesn't feel like there's any space, it becomes really, really hard to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen this in the corporate world too. It's like all of this.
I think that's all well said. I think we've got a lot of different contexts. You could probably, as you're listening to this, you could probably name a few. I'm sure what Jim and I have just said is only in part. You could probably think of like 12 other contextual pieces that are probably creating stress for you.
Yeah.
So that part that Viktor Frankl speaks to is really wonderful because he is speaking, of course, about and to people at the time who had suffered in the concentration camps. Mm. And this was his observation, was that was even available to people in those tremendously stressful places. Mm-hmm. And so one is to recognize that, yes, I'm having a hard time because of these contexts. Yeah. There's no question the context impacts us greatly. And to the degree that we can change that, we should change it. But there's also some contexts you can't change. And so there is this, how am I going to respond? And that I have more agency in this moment than what I feel like I have.
Yes. And finding the areas in which I can apply the most agency first.
Yeah.
An area that I started applying the most agency first that was an issue for me was sleep. And I had heard this whole thing, like just get up the same time every day. And that wasn't great advice for me. But going to bed at the same time every night was much better advice. And then if my body needed a little more sleep and there was some flexibility. And that works for me because I tend to wake up very early. So there's always usually margin in the morning. But that was an area where I really needed to apply focus. And then I struggled. I tried melatonin. And then I realized that was actually messing up my natural rhythms and discovered more about why that wasn't good for me and had to come off of that and then tried to find other things like sleep mask and all of these things. So it was like there was a real focus on trying to change the context of that thing because I had agency over that. Mm-hmm. I had agency over certain nutrition things and dietary things that can actually create a body that has more energy, that isn't getting as tired as quickly or worn down by the same amount of things. And I could take agency in that. What I would want people to do immediately is to kind of take stock of the different settings, the context that they are in, mm-hmm. whether it be family, work, their bodies, their time, how they're using their time, tracking their money, your phone usage, whatever it is. Start to understand the lay of the land and then see like where can you apply the most agency the most quickly.
Yeah. I agree. I think that is very empowering to think of what are the situations right now. And many times we might look at it and say, I don't see any agency in this space. I feel like I'm being affected by it all. But pause for a moment, even now as you're listening to this, and reflect. Do you have agency over something? Is there something right now in your life that you're saying, nope, can't change that, can't change that, can't change that? And I do think that making a practical change is as important as also making an internal change, dispositional change towards that situation. One is not superior to the other. You can't just say, well, psychologically, I can change the way I look at things, and that's good enough. Nor can you say, oh, I'm just going to make changes to everything in life and not worry about the internal space.
Right.
Because again, there's some things you can change and there's some things you can't.
Yeah.
But how you go about it, I think, is very important. So yeah, I love that. I think, as we think about the different contexts that we're in. How can we bring change to the areas that we can bring change to? And then how do we respond internally with a different attitude, a different disposition to the things that we have no power over at this moment?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think there is a certain extent where the external stressor, the context, becomes the ultimate focus. And like, now I have to change this external thing. And then we can, end up dropping the internal world. But it's really like, we're not saying to dismiss all this internal work that we've been encouraging people to do for the last 4 years, but we want to bring this alongside the context. Like, if these things are working in tandem, because what I've seen is a lot of times people wanting to change their inner experience and then frustrated because of some external thing. And then I've also seen the external thing come in and it prevents people from working on the internal world. So it's really this pairing. I feel like the most impactful moments of my life were when the context and the internal world were being developed simultaneously, where there was something happening in both. I thought I was training for a triathlon to get my health in gear, but I also found that on long bike rides, I was releasing forgiveness and any kind of like victim mentality that was left in me and working through some of that emotional issues and time to process certain things. So it really was this pairing of the worlds kind of coming together. And I think it always actually has to be. There has to be sort of that little bit of space. This is something we're kind of noodling around and processing, but we just can't ignore this context piece,
Yeah, I had a conversation with a client the other day, and I'll leave a lot of this anonymous and change some of the details, but there's always this like, I'm stuck. I can't change this piece. This part is just, it's intractable. What do I do? I can't do anything. And the funny thing about it is they're almost always, this is what's remarkable. It's remarkably simple that there are changes that we need to do, but it's not easy. And this is what I said to one of my clients. If it's simple but difficult, you're on the right track.
Yes.
If it's complicated and easy,
right,
you're on the wrong track. Right?
Yes, and I think that's what people look for.
The complicated.
Yes.
Oh, totally.
But I've had this same conversation with clients. It's like we think it's complicated to understand and easy to do, but it's always easy to understand and difficult to do.
Yeah.
Like the most transformational stuff, that's just how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really pisses me off when someone sees the clarity of it and points it out in my own life. Like, well, just do this.
Yeah.
You know what you're supposed to do. It's this action.
Yeah.
And I get angry because it is hard. The answer is easy, but it's hard to do. So what do? I complicate it, because that way I can maybe think through it and outthink the problem, somehow get around it. And that may be just my personality type.
Well, no, I think everyone does. I think everyone complicates as a way of bypassing.
It's a bypassing technique for sure.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, totally. I do it. Yeah.
But yeah, it's always that, it's the one thing. It's the one thing that I don't want to do. That if I do it, it usually unleashes a lot of energy. It's been contracted, so now there's like this opening and energy flows. I feel significantly better. And changes happen pretty dramatically from that. But it's when I'm resistant to it. Then it gets confusing and complicated, and I can take a therapist on a long ride with me, or I can take a coach on a long ride with me, because I can forever meander around all these other issues. It's the sort of mental bypassing. I can look at this situation, look at that situation, and well, if you think about it this way, or maybe you should change your way of seeing it this way. We can forever do that, play that game. But if you've got to change something, like, hey, look, you hate your job. You hate your job. I had this was another client of mine. I hate my job. Like I got her to the point of actually saying it. She really did. I could tell. And then it's, but I've got all these concerns, right? List all the concerns. I get it. Those are real.
Very real.
Very real.
Very real.
So there's nobody that can tell you have to do it and do it right now.
Yeah.
But you know what your own body's telling you. It's telling you it's had enough and it wants out. So now it's just a matter of time. How do we get ourselves there? Well, we got ourselves there. And I got this email, just like, I did it, huge exclamation marks, super excited. have another job lined up and things are rolling now. It's the one thing. It was the one thing that she needed to do. And we could have spent all this time talking about her personality, her emotional experience of the job, her thoughts about the job,
how to navigate the relationships within that job better.
Oh, that absolutely came up.
You could spend a lot of time on that.
Oh yeah,
you could spend a lot of time when you're trying to solve some of those issues. You can spend a lot of time trying to solve the wrong things.
Yeah,
when really the entire context has to change first. Then you can work on some of this other stuff. I've been in contexts for sure that I could not have done any inner work in there because all of the energy just went to dealing with being there.
Yeah.
And I get it. So I love that she actually left there. She got to start fresh somewhere. And then you can start to navigate, well, okay, now I can start to look at these other pieces a bit more. I can approach the relationships at this new job from a fresh start and try to understand where they're coming from before I have so many triggers and stuff like that I'm not in that context. So she changed her context.
Mm-hmm.
And then that provided the context of being able to do better and more.
Yeah, and actually the kind of work that she's going to be doing is far more in line with her purpose, her larger kind of, this is what I'm here to do. This is what I love to do.
Yeah.
And if I tune into that, then this is my truth. Well, this lines up much better with it. So now you can imagine the amount of energy that's put into trying to just survive now is been released. It's come back to her. I think that's what a lot of us are doing is just trying to deal with everything else and then facing the one thing. But it's usually context. But this is why we're doing this thing on context. It's because almost always it's contextual. It's the situation. It's something very practical that needs to shift. Yeah. It's like, I need to end this relationship. I need to change my job.
Yeah.
I need to deal with my eating habits. I need to deal with my sleeping habits. I need to get out of debt. I've had this looming debt in my, it's always in the back of my mind, right?
Right.
And if you have a number of these contextual things happening at the same time, you don't realize just how much space it takes up in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
And of course, for some of you, it's on the very front of your mind. But
and how much energy.
Oh, yeah.
Because if I'm noticing a pattern in a couple of the things that we've started talking about, more behind the scenes than publicly, but we've been talking a lot about this context thing, that we've also been talking about the quality of energy.
Yeah.
Like, what is the quality of energy you bring to this thing? What is your relationship to that thing? And what is the quality of energy that you are living with all the time if, like, 4 of those areas you just mentioned are off?
Yeah.
Impossible.
Yeah. I think who was it? Is it John O'Donohue? Or I can't remember saying, you watch people as they're going to the grocery stores. Nobody's ever in any one location. They're never there. They're there, but they're not really there. And that is because of all of this stuff, the contextual stuff that we carry with us. So when we show up somewhere, we're not lighthearted and not carrying it. Now, for some of us, we know what to do. We carry it, but then what we do is we show up at an event, at a party, which we're excited to be at because it's like a relief from that.
Yeah.
And in that way, it's an escape and we leave everything behind us. But then to return back to that context. And now it's even more difficult, which is why I think it's important for us to, if whatever escapes we have, it's to try to think of maybe changing the escapes to how can I take time to reimagine my life, right? So that's a different way of taking a break from your life is I'm going to take a break, but to reimagine so that I can come back in and maybe make some practical decisions and change some things. And it's not a running. So this is the warning. For some of us, it can be like, oh yeah, I want to change my whole, I need to change everything, right? So then you can go to that extreme of like,
running.
I'm going to get rid of all my relationships. I'm going to get rid of all this. And if you look at your own history, you've done this numerous times. And so it'll be like, I'm tossing everything and starting over, right?
And everywhere I went, I was still there.
I was still there. That's a hard thing. And I mean, I'm one of those people, so I'm not mocking anybody. I happen to be one of those people who can quickly change a lot of things and just be done with it, right? And start over. I love the new. It's fresh. It's a start. But yeah, I kept bringing myself everywhere I went, and that's a problem. So that's the stuff that we don't want to suggest is the answer is just toss everything and start over.
Because if you do that, you'll actually recreate the exact context you're already in.
Yeah.
That's the thing that is the problem with running. The problem with running is you do not actually outrun it. you will recreate it. You will recreate it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But I like the reimagining. Like you talked about this, like the sacred imagination, using the sacred imagination to imagine a better life that is more aligned. And I remember very clearly before Vera was 1 year old and Abby and I going to Red Lobster and sitting down. I've been to Red Lobster like twice in my life, but this is one of them. I thank it for this. The biscuits and us just saying, we have to dream it up again. Like it's time we have to dream it up again. And it wasn't a running, it was an acknowledgement of what it was. But here's one of the signs, I think, that the context is a big problem, is notice how much do you have to distract yourself in this situation? How many medications do you need? And I'm not talking about just substances, but I mean, TikTok can be one of them. It can be anything, but how much distraction do you need in your day is probably a sign that there's something severely off in your context and that you are not on brand for you.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And, out there, how many people, in your own life, if it's not you yourself, that the weekends is, what you live for. And there's a whole lot of marketing that goes around that. Like, it's like the marketers know, the advertisement agencies know, like everybody's life sucks. They hate it during the week, right? They at best tolerate their jobs. And so let's just promote weekend living. So of course it's targeted to a certain age demographic, but it's like, okay, let's have a party, drink, enjoy life. They even know how to market it towards those who are married and have kids and have homes. And it's like, on the weekends, you're going to run to Home Depot. You're going to get the products, the tools, the material you need, and you're going to start this project and you're just going to
make the backyard better.
Yeah.
For the barbecue.
Yeah. It's
end scene with party in the backyard and grill and everyone's smiling with
everybody's smiling.
Budweiser.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. And that's great. Because it's a great visual, and of course, many of us love that. But
yeah. Memorial Day yesterday, I had a great barbecue outside. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah,
but it's not an escape,
Right. So, and for those who are using it, I mean, you're using either the partying on the weekends to try to just like, okay, I'm going to start drinking as soon as Friday afternoon rolls around, and continue on through the weekend, or I'm going to do some project in the backyard, something, but anything to escape what is currently happening. And this stuff, of course, piles up on us. So the reimagining can help us to go not running from things, not running from our contexts, not throwing our context out instantly, but to see how can I have more agency over my life, stop playing victim, and start lining up more and more of my life towards my greater purpose, my reason for being here, what I love, So again, it's not an external thing. Listen to the Purpose Trap if you haven't already.
Yeah.
But like, it's not external. It's not someone else putting it on you.
Right.
It's not something you have to go chase or find. It's something already within you. And it's something you love. So practice reimagining your life in that way, I think. And then make the changes in the context, the big things that are the hardest to do. You get a few of those big shifts taking place, they take care of a lot of little issues.
Yeah.
You be chasing those little issues for the rest of your life, but you deal with a few of the big ones, and wow, it gives you a whole lot more energy, as I said, and it fixes a lot of the smaller issues you're dealing with.
Yes, because that is the way, that is the path to move from a life that needs to be distracted from to a life that is savored. And I think that is this movement, is from, what is pulling me down, what is in the way, what is really hard to deal with, to being like, I can savor this. Because when you're in that context, you can even savor some of the harder things. Like I was mentioning families with young kids at home, and sometimes you got a kid that's a challenge. I know I do. And intentionally moving towards, I'm not changing that context, right? Parenting is a context that's constantly changing because those kids are constantly evolving, but I'm not going to change the context of being a parent, right? And not do this.
Right.
But I want to navigate some of the other pieces so that I can savor this more. I can savor this process more, because there's certain things that like the context may not change. Like you know that you're going to have a hard year because your business is booming. You're growing, and you're trying to go public this year. You're doing something, and it's going to be really, really hard for the next year. And you're going to change that context. But in what ways can you savor? Can you realize that this is a story that someday I'm going to be telling and being like, man, this is the year we made it through. This was a hard year. And I think that's the difference. Is there's certain context. I take no joy in the fact that I survived it, because that's all that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to maintain and double down. And those aren't the kind of contexts that I feel I want to stay committed to.
Mm-hmm.
I want to stay committed to the ones that I'm like, yeah.
That's value driven. That's value driven.
Exactly.
Right.
Value driven context.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think as we shift more of these things, like morphing this life, asking those important questions about your life, it can get better.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole point. We want it to get better, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I wasn't looking forward to the weekend any more than I was today, knowing we were going to come in, we're going to record a video for the membership. We're going to talk about some business stuff. We're going to record stuff that helps people. Like this is not worse than my weekend, Yeah.
Yeah. And on the flip side, it's not like every aspect of everything we do is just total excitement, joy, positivity. No. I mean, there's some things that are really difficult about what we do, whether it's work or life at home. It's not that it's all easy when you're doing it right, but what makes the difference is it's purposeful. It fits my values. This is why I can do the hard work on this. It's because I value this in my life, and it fits within my overall purpose of why I'm here. So,
well, I'm going to spend the rest of my afternoon in the editing suite.
Yeah,
but
that's not fun.
Which is not my favorite thing. I know it's not, but at the same time, it's in service of everyone listening to this right now, which means it's on purpose.
Yeah.
And so the context of it is that it is an act of service, and that it's totally worth it, right?
Yeah.
Totally worth it in every way. And I've never been like, that wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
I think if I have too many that wasn't worth it in a row, that's a context that needs to change.
Right.
Right. That's a context I'm like, man, if I want to change my health, because that was one too many flights of stairs going up and I'm way too out of breath. That's a context I want to change. I am just too tired in the day, and that means I cannot stay up till 11 and watch shows.
Right.
These kinds of things that just go, not worth it. Okay.
Right.
Got to change that.
Yeah.
And then the final act that we're looking for is more purpose, more freedom, a better experience in the internal and the external world.
Yeah. It's both the response that you have towards whatever it is that you're dealing with, and also the changes that need to be brought in. So there's an internal dispositional change. I need to change the way I see this. Like you're describing, I want to savor the moments that I'm with my family. And then there's also things I have to physically, practically change in the context of my life.
So this week, tune into those, take stock of some of the context that you're in. Notice the different areas of your life. Think about, the spiritual, the relational, the emotional, the physical, the intellectual, the financial. Go through these categories in your life and say, what's going on in there? Where do I have the hardest time applying the kind of energy that I want? What is my relationship to each of these things like? What is my relationship to my body? My gut, my sleep, what is my relationship to my finances, to the people around me? Take stock of the context that's influencing you. See where there could be more agency. See where it feels like I'm not ready for that one right now. That's okay. Tons of grace for that one. Tons of grace for that one I'm not ready to handle yet. Okay. Where's a little more agency in one of those areas? And if we start taking stock and we start moving in that direction, I think it'll be good. It'll be good. So thank you so much for listening. We're going to get real practical in this series because we have to get real practical. If we want deep and lasting change, we can't bypass or sidestep any of these areas that we're going to be talking about. But one of the things that makes all of this so much easier to navigate, easier to be in, is if we do it in community. And the Art of Growth community officially launched this month. The first meeting is today, the day that this recording is being released, May 7th, 2022. And the Art of Growth community is a group of people who are going to meet together for accountability, for planning, for relationship with others who are on a similar path and in a similar journey. And this month's theme is purpose, which is a word that's going to be coming back around through some of this series because of how much it impacts everything else we do. So to join the Art of Growth community, go to theartofgrowth.org. And under classes and events, there's a menu for this community, and you can join there. There's additional content there, as well as several people already waiting to welcome you and share some life on life in a safe place. If you're interested in individual coaching with Joel or I, you can reach out to us at theartofgrowth.org as well. And you can also email us there to start discussions about what it would look like in your company or your organization to have the Enneagram at work for you. If you leave us a review on iTunes, it really helps people find the show. And you can follow us on Instagram at just Art of Growth. But for now, my friends, may you be gracious and bold in taking stock of your life and looking at where the context could be holding you back and where you can find some agency to approach that. It may be in your spiritual life, your emotional life, your relational life, your intellectual life, your physical life, your financial life. And may you not do anything yet, but may you notice. May you take stock and then welcome the change that comes as an invitation with the noticing, which is why we notice in grace. All right, my friends, grace and growth. Until next time.